Uber passengers of Reddit that have given 15 stars on a ride. What happened to make it so bad? Story 1. The driver didn't want to wait in traffic, so he drove up onto the sidewalk. We all screamed at him to get back on the road as he continued to drive down the sidewalk while pedestrians ran out of the way. He told us that it wasn't a sidewalk. It was an Uber lane. It was a miracle he didn't actually run anyone over. Story 2 kept talking to me nonstop and was asking me questions and kept trying to show me music videos on his phone while driving and drove me to the wrong location and ended up charging me more. Immediately gave him a 1 star. Story 3, she had 3 kids with her, one in the front, probably 14, a preteen in the back, and a toddler, no older than 3, also in the back with no car seat. She was also driving erratically and reeked of weed. Story 4, Uber driver was visibly drunk, not blackout drunk, but it was obvious he was having a hard time staying in his lane. He kept veering over the yellow line, then with the wheel the other way, nearly running us off the road a few times. He also had an open can of Bud Light in his cup holder. I had him drop me off a few blocks from my actual destination because I didn't want to die that night. Rated him 1 star and reported him, not sure if anything came from it. Story 5, when I got into the car, he immediately yelled in a stern voice, "State your account ID." I take Uber almost daily, and I know drivers like to ask for your name, but I was so taken aback by the aggressive yelling. As soon as I got into the car, I was met with the most awful smell I've ever experienced in my whole life. It was like something died in his car. I had to hold my breath throughout the 20-minute ride. Then he drove me to the wrong place. 2 times. By the second time, I just decided to walk to my destination because I was so vexed by the smell before I got out after sitting in the car in silence. He yelled, "Rate 5 stars. He wouldn't unlock the door until I agreed. Yep, 15. Story 6, he refused to acknowledge my presence and kept asking my husband if he thought it was fine that he, the driver, wanted to take a second wife because he believed men should be happy. My husband was not about that at all and said that if he wanted a second wife, she deserved a second husband, and the driver flipped out and told us that men deserve more than women and that she should be fulfilled by taking care of his children. It was incredibly surreal, uncomfortable, and demeaning. So yeah, big complaint was filed with Lyft. Edit, he specifically said he did not believe in divorce and wanted multiple wives because it was normal in his religion. I'm also the person that ordered and paid for the ride, and he actually shushed me several times for chiming in. Story 7, they just never came. I waited 20 minutes, and the car drove around in circles nowhere near my location. I eventually just canceled, but when I did, my score dropped. I went from a 5.00 to like a 4.9 or something. So she must have rated me. Then it gave me the option to rate her, so I gave her a 15. I don't know if it was a glitch or what, but now I can never recover my perfect score. Story 8, I was taking an Uber home from the airport. The ride was perfect, and he even insisted on dropping my baggage to the front door. Awesome. He then asked if he could use the restroom really quick, and of course I obliged. He wasn't in there for more than 3 minutes, but when I went to wash my hands after, I found my bathroom destroyed. It was all over the toilet seat, and just everywhere. I really wish he had just taken more than a minute and shat like a normal human being, but the dude must have had a leaky butthole, because there was on my walls too. A 1-star review was the bare minimum, I think. She was simultaneously driving for Lyft and picked up another passenger completely out of our way, then proceeded to brag about how she picked up some high school kids earlier, and they had their destination set to the liquor store where she bought them liquor. Story 9, I was at the DC Zoo and needed to get the metro and had foolishly decided I didn't need my cane, so I didn't want to walk back. The driver picked me up and tried to convince me to just get a ride to Union Station instead of the nearest red line. When I declined, he pulled over and canceled the ride, reporting me as drunk and abusive. Story 10, I was on a work trip in another city. Riding into my first shift at around 5 a.m., we were having a casual conversation, and he asked whether I had a boyfriend. I said yes. As we were pulling into the empty parking lot, no one else was there yet, and I was trying to figure out which of the buildings I was supposed to be in. He asked if I would go get a coffee with him instead. I said no, and told him I thought it was the building straight ahead, but he turned the other way and started circling the parking lot. He said something about no one else being there yet, so I should just get coffee with him, and I said no again and asked him to just stop and let me out, and I would find my way by foot. He let me out, but then pulled into a parking spot and lingered there until some time after I found my way in. Story 11, he had a lot of stuff in the back and made me ride in the front with him. I hate riding in the front with Uber drivers, so I told him he'll just get another Uber, and he persisted for me to ride with him. I was already late to dinner with my family, so I got in, and it was more uncomfortable because he asked a lot of personal questions like where I worked and what my shifts were. Once I got out, I immediately gave him 1 star and would have given him some negative stars as well if I could. Story 12, immediately when I got in the car, I was hit by an incense-wise smell that was so strong it gave me an instant headache. She spent the whole ride trying to get me to join her essential oil downline in a well-known oil MLM. I declined politely, and then firmly I thought we got to my destination and my head was pounding. She stopped and locked the doors. She told me that she wasn't going to let me out until I gave her my email address. I kind of chuckled and unlocked my door, and she immediately locked it again. Then she pressed child lock so that when I tried to open the door, it didn't budge. I was shocked and scared, and she repeated that I had to give her my email address and handed me a notepad and pen. I made one up and dashed out of there. Immediately reported her. A couple of weeks later, she somehow found me on Facebook and sent a friend request. Needless to say, I blocked her. Story 13, took an Uber from my house to the airport for a work trip. Flight was at 10 a.m. Picked me up at 7:30. Got a call from my boss on the way in. Driver screamed at me to hang up because he couldn't hear his podcast on his headphones. My boss, who heard the insane rant, told the entire team to switch to Lyft or taxis after that. Story 14, no, what? Uno reverse card. I used to drive for Uber. I one-starred a passenger because he wanted me to end the trip early, then drive him the rest of the way to save him money. Because come on, bro, I one-starred a passenger because he booked a regular Uber 4 seatbelts despite having a group of 8 people. Because an Uber XL costs like $1 more. I one-starred an old drunk lady because she would not stay in her seat, and off my head. Yes, Ethel, my head is shaved and is hella sexy, but we are on the freeway. Sit the down. I one-starred a dude who changed his destination 6 times in one trip and made me change it on his phone for him. I one-starred a pair of freshman chicks who were mad that I wouldn't let them light a joint in my car. You're not that cute. Liz and Elizabeth. I one-starred every single drunk who got pizza grease, falafel bits, or fried chicken crumbs in my car. I have to clean that. You little shits. Story 15, he hit a cyclist who was taking home a pizza slice. Didn't help him up. Didn't buy him a new pizza slice. He also ran a bunch of red lights and asked for 5 stars at the end. Story 16, she was texting and driving. Yelled as she almost hit the curb while entering the interstate, and she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. We were stoned and terrified the whole time. Story 17, the guy fell asleep at the wheel and rear-ended a car in front of us, then tried to flee, then left me at the side of the freeway at Fruitvale in Oakland. In the end, I got a $500 credit from Uber. Story 18, she wouldn't shut up for 2 seconds and just droned on and on about her life and things I really didn't care about, only to get angry when I stopped paying attention. Her car was a mess. The back seats were covered in trash. I could barely breathe. It was a pigsty. I had to shove a trash can worth of empty bottles and cans just to sit. She had a little baby in the car who screamed the whole way and wasn't even in a car seat. Nope, this kid was just in the front, buckled into the seat without any precautions. When I mentioned that I have dogs to feed, she called dogs flea-ridden retards and then went on and on about why her cats were better. Proceeded to check people multiple times and then got pissed when I told her to stop because I had an upset stomach. Went on a huge tirade of why LGBTQ people are the Antichrist and will bring about the end of society. When I mentioned I have a boyfriend, she just said the same things, but louder. Picked apart everything I was wearing, calling my trashy and lazy for still being in pajamas. I legitimately had no clothes despite that, demanded extra payment after the ride. Despite me tipping her 10, negatively reviewed me, and made my score drop to a 4, 6, 15, I'm never riding with you ever again. I don't even know your name, and I'm glad I didn't. I despise your car, your attitude, and your complete lack of care for your own child. Story 19, my 1-star ride was actually my first Uber ride. Was at a meeting out of town and decided to take an Uber a couple miles down the road to visit an exhibit during the lunch break. I was excited to see what Uber was all about, so I watched in the app the whole time as my driver drove away from my location instead of towards it. He finally called me and asked where I was, which was weird because I could clearly see where he was in the app. I told him the building where the meeting was, and he was familiar with it. So we hung up. He made it to my location shortly after, and the ride to the exhibit was pretty uneventful. But after he dropped me off, I quickly found that the exhibit was closed on Mondays. No biggie. They'll just Uber back to the meeting. Not so easy because the driver forgot to end the trip, and I couldn't call a new Uber because it said I was already on a trip. I had the driver's number, so I call him in the trip, but he didn't answer. I left a message and set out to call Uber customer service to see if they could end the trip. Good luck trying to get a real person on the line. So I ended up walking back to the meeting, finally got a call back from the driver after I made it back, and he explained that he went to lunch after dropping me and left his phone in his car. He ended the ride, but didn't report the issue, and I was charged $30 for a 2-mile ride. BC, the meter was running while he ate his lunch. I started the process of trying to get the ride fees back, but can't remember if it was ever resolved. Story 20, my Uber picked up someone else instead of me. When I called him to tell him that wasn't me, he put the passenger on the phone and kept driving to the destination. I had to cancel it, and I think he dropped the passenger off at some random spot in town. Uber wouldn't refund my ride either. Story 21 being one of my first Uber rides, I mistakenly sat on the front instead of the back. While he was taking me home from AF, he started talking to me and randomly threw in there that he could give me his phone number to make him my regular driver, and then proceeded to say he was kidding and placed his hand on my leg. I was wearing shorts. I felt extremely uncomfortable and unsafe because he dropped me home. I immediately reported him to Uber, and they actually called me to have a better sense of what happened. They never told me exactly what they did, but they did say they took appropriate action, so who knows. Story 22 rode in the front due to number of passengers. She shifted in a pee every time we were stopped at a light, then proceeded to tell us about her abusive exes and about how now she carries a loaded handgun in her purse, which was by my feet, because if she ever runs into that last ex, she's going to shoot him. Story 23 also had an old Indian woman come pick me up outside of a hotel and watch her circle me 10 times while I waved at her in the middle of the street. We even made eye contact several times, but she just kept on passing me. When she finally pulled up to me, she almost hit me. I think she may have been at least partially blind. Then she did 20 under the speed limit the whole way there, lol. 15. Story 24, 2 stories YY. First one, my mom and I were on our way back from my dentist appointment, and we ordered one. However, the place is like a maze, so it took him a long time to find us. But my mom was talking to him on the phone, so whatever. So he finds us and we get in. Normal ride. Then we get to our house, and after 10 minutes, my mom got the canceled ride. What was normally a $10 ride was a $30 to $40 ride. My mom got a refund and gave 1 star. Next one, for my birthday, we were going out and decided to get a ride. This old man picks us up. Normal ride up until we get to a turn that he should take. But he does it because the app tells him something different than my mom, and she doesn't say anything fast enough by the time. My mom casually mentions how ITLL be a couple bucks over what it normally costs. The dude tries to argue, and then out of nowhere he starts yelling at my mom, who's kept a calm voice and literally wouldn't let us out until we got there, and was just a general. Once again, 1 star. Story 25, I was running late for my flight. Driver didn't realize that he couldn't drop me off at the airport because he didn't have a special permit for that. Instead of telling me to find another Uber, he drove around the corner and bus waits for me to do something until I let myself out. I was still charged the cancellation fee, and I ended up having to call 3 Ubers. If my flight wasn't delayed by 10 minutes, I would have missed it. Story 26 said get in as I was walking up to the car. Then when I got in the back, he started mouthing off to the guy beside him at a red light. Told him he's and gave him 1 star. Story 27, he asked if he could take me out sometime. I told him I wasn't interested. Then he started blaring his music. Luckily, I was only a couple minutes from my destination. Story 28, my sister gave an Uber driver 15. He did not understand a word of English and apparently could not read English either, as he disregarded nearly every street sign, including NO left, which she yelled at him for as he was about to make a left on NO left across a very busy intersection. He also attempted to back up when he missed a street. She yelled at him for that one too, given it was on a busy street. She immediately rated him 15. She contacted them and told them that the man should not be driving for them. He is a very unsafe driver. They told her they would unpair her with him. Great, someone else will get killed, I'm sure. Story 29, this Uber driver was extremely curious about my life. He asked me if I was partying or drunk. He asked me if I lived by myself and new in town, and he started talking about how he liked Indian women. It was very uncomfortable. That night, I slept with a hammer under my pillow. It was so scary. Story 30, I had a guy pick me up with his car smelling like meth. He tried to convince me to take his number, and he would drive me around without the Uber app. Also tried to make me sit up front and gave me really weird compliments. Story 31, nothing. She was great. We hadn't used Uber in years and accidentally hit 1 star instead of 5. We thought we'd get a chance to correct it, but nope. Already locked in. We felt terrible. Gave a nice tip and called customer support to try and fix it, but we're told they don't allow reviews to be changed for any reason. Fortunately, the lady had a ton of reviews and a 4.9 average, so we probably didn't bring it down too much. Story 32, he drove the wrong way down a busy downtown 4-lane street on a Friday evening, all while telling us he just came from the local comedy club, which I happen to know has a 2-drink minimum on Fridays. I was terrified. Story 33, Lyft. Got pulled over for speeding and no seatbelt. Proceeded to then say he's gotten 4 seatbelt tickets and won't ever wear one. Also had a beat to car. Not sure how it was Lyft approved. Story 34, they drove 25 kilometers below the speed limit. Flipped off the locals honking and overtaking them, took a longer route because he knows the area really well, etc. I was silent and understanding the whole ride, except when I calmly explained why the locals are mad at the guy going 75 kilometers on a 100 kilometers road. After I got to my stop, I looked at my passenger rating and lost my perfect 5 stars. I was riding with a bag of specialty groceries, and the driver asked what I had bought. I was happy to make idle chit-chat, so I answered truthfully I was going to make a goat curry. Over the next 10 minutes, he monologued about how much he loved goat curry and how you just can't get a good one in this town, and he needed to marry a wife who made a good goat curry and had never met a woman who even liked goat before. And my curry must be really good. And can he have my number? Could he have my number? He needed my number. ID, obviously make a good wife, and give him lots of children and lots of good goat curry. Phone number, I gave him a fake number and scrambled out of the back seat. Never have I felt more grateful that I was being dropped off at the subway station and not in front of my apartment. Story 35, the driver didn't take me to my location, had a messy car, smelled really bad, spent the whole time talking on the phone driving one-handed, didn't follow my directions. I had him pull over so I could get a different driver. Story 36 took the wrong exit, and we ended having to cross the border into Canada. As we were driving over the bridge, she told me she had a bowl and a bag of weed. This was right before it became legal there. So she threw it off the bridge. Her car still stunk so bad. Border Patrol officers searched the car and did paperwork for an hour and a half. Nobody got in trouble, but an 8-minute drive turned into 2 hours. Uber wouldn't refund my ride either. Story 37, one guy spent the entire ride telling me about Uber drivers that rape murder their passengers. One guy ran multiple red lights. Not technically I got to the intersection when it was yellow type red, but like if there had been 2 cars in front of him, neither would have made it through legally type red. My rule of thumb is that if the driver somehow makes me feel like I legitimately might not survive the trip, I give him her 1 star. I say him her, but I'm pretty sure it's only been dudes so far. Story 38 asked me if I liked cocaine within the first few minutes, then proceeded to tell me about how much he loved it, including a story about when Head once done crack and tried to throw himself out of a window because he felt so depressed afterward, then tried to take my number. Story 39, TLDR, Uber with a rusty spoon. Also sorry for the mobile formatting. Last week, man, my car's in the shop, so Eve been Ubering to work. I booked the Uber to work and schedule a stop on the way gas station. Guy shows up, doesn't speak much English, but I'm not feeling it chatty, so no prob. So the ride is normal. He pulls into the gas station. I say thanks, be right back, and hop out, buy some cigarettes and a coffee. Head back outside. No more Uber. Right about this time I realize I left my work clothes, work shoes, and a bunch of other I desperately need in that car. Deep breaths. I check the app, it still says I'm halfway through the trip. Wait now, it's glitching out and shows the car where it picked me up. Wait now, it's saying the trip is over. Please rate your ride. But wait, it gets better. The app won't let me call the driver. I can only leave a voicemail message. So now I'm calling my wife at her work to come pick me up, drive me home, and get my backup Palo work. Around this time, the lovely Uber driver calls me back. He's a little peeved at me for leaving his car. At least I think he is. We can barely break through the language barrier enough to figure out how to get me my stuff back. He finally gets across the message that he's coming to my apartment now. He'll be there in 15 minutes. I'm now already an hour late to work, but let's just get this resolved. 1 hour later, he shows up, glares at me for troubling him so much, and physically backs into me before pulling away. I was behind the car when he reversed to turn around. I stumbled a bit. Whatever, it's fine. I kind of thought I was over this and now I'm worked up again. Sorry, that turned into an essay. Me and a friend took an Uber I ordered. We got in with the address already entered into the app and just had a basic greeting, and she verified the address. During the ride, my friend and I talked to each other, and not to the driver, but she didn't address us at all. When we arrived, I thanked her and got out first. As my friend was getting out, he watched her give me 3 stars. He told me once she was pulling away, and I immediately gave 1 star. I don't know what more I must go as a passenger than common greetings, thanks, and pay to get a 5-star rating. Story 40, we were in Vegas, and we're heading to the zombie burlesque show. So we called an Uber. The dude was a bit off as he didn't really acknowledge us. I think he was messed up on something as he was super sweaty and his face kept twitching. He then covered everything from the neck down with a large towel, and I believe he was jerking off while speeding through the strip. The final part was him driving 50 miles per hour in the underground parking garage at the Planet Hollywood Casino and was weaving between pillars, which he almost hit. We got out the second. He had to stop due to cars being in front of him. Story 41, in southern France, we had one Uber driver who kept looping around and running up the trip. He also went exceedingly fast on a hillside road with blind corners and two-way traffic. We also had one that picked us up in Ease and was supposed to take us to Monaco, but went through Nice. Ease is halfway between Nice and Monaco. So we were already halfway to Monaco, and he went all the way back to Nice first. Both times we rated 1 star and complained and got reimbursed for part of the trips. Story 42, I use Uber Lyft often. Here's some of the drivers I've had and what they did. 1. Decided to smoke a cigarette with all the windows rolled up. 2. Another one driving me to my job Starbucks told me that they only hire illegals and I should really work for a company who works with veterans and supports the NRA. Like insert random unheard of coffee company. My name is also of biblical origin, so he spent the entire 20 minutes of the ride telling me that I should quit my job and act biblically. 3. Using his girlfriend's account and car. He picked me up, and when I asked him why his girlfriend didn't pick me up, he told me they shared her account. That set off red flags, but it was almost 4 a.m. and I didn't want to be late for work, so I went along. Then as I was waiting for my coworker to open up the store, he came back around and asked me if I had a boyfriend and if he could pick me up after work. Remember, he was driving his girlfriend's car. After I told him I wasn't interested, he angrily revved his engine and peeled off for her. Was picked up by this lady who gave me a business card with her number on it and said I should use her personal driving service. Wouldn't let me out until I confirmed that I put her number in my phone and would use her for any rides. Didn't rate her, but then I got her a week later on the same rideshare service, and the first thing she asked was why I didn't personally call her for all of my rides. 5. Another one had music blaring and strobe lights synced to the music in his car and was dancing and singing along while having no hands on the wheel. Was speeding and swerving in and out of traffic and looking back at me every other minute to make sure I was having fun. I was not, and asked to be dropped off a few blocks away from my house so I could just walk the rest of the way home. Reported him to Uber, and they said from the drop-off time, it didn't seem that he was speeding, but assured me they wouldn't match me with him again. A month later, and I was matched with him again. Story 43 was going across the Bay Bridge at 1 a.m., and I noticed the driver's head keeps drooping down throughout the trip. We're about halfway across the bridge, heading to the East Bay, and his head droops down, and he swerves across 2 lanes to the right abruptly. I yell at him. He wakes back up and acts as if nothing happened. Saw my life flash. Reported that guy. Story 44, the guy was driving a solid 20 on a 50 mph road. I had to be somewhere in less than 10 minutes. But with him being the driver, it took over 2 times that. I sometimes still wonder how he hasn't gotten a ticket yet. Story 45, I was riding with 2 other friends. We were having a conversation about the role naval technology played in WW2. The conversation was literally about boats, when the Uber driver starts chiming in about how Hitler wasn't so bad, and he kick-started the German economy, made the country what it is today. The driver ranted on about the merits of Hitler for the remainder of the drive. That's a 1 star from me, with a comment saying next time you're driving 3 Jews around, don't talk about how great Hitler is. Oy vey. Story 46, halfway to the airport. For flight I was running a little late for, but would have made it. The driver pulled off at a random exit, announced that he didn't feel like going all the way to the airport and had somewhere else to be soon. Made me get out and call another Uber. Only low rating I've ever given. Still made my flight, but just barely. Story 47, I've had to give 15 stars on a few occasions. But one of the most pertinent would be when the driver decided to drop me off on the other side of a busy highway across from my house after refusing to pull into the driveway. When I started insisting that he pull into the driveway, he started screaming at me in Arabic. I'm legally blind, and this was at night. I also happen to have total night blindness, so getting across the street to my house was a nightmare. When I reported this to Uber, they said I had no basis on which to complain, but agreed to issue me a refund since it was my first time filing a complaint. Other reasons have included a filthy car that smelled like liquid diarrhea that was left in the sun for a month, the driver relying on me for directions, and my personal favorite, the driver had a personal conversation in Spanish the whole time and referred me to as an idiot, among other things. I happen to speak nearly fluent Spanish and simply said, I understood you the whole time as I got out of the car. Story 48, took an Uber pool, and it was just me and this dude studying nursing in America from Africa. He was black. He spoke amazing English. The African guy was let off first, and the driver proceeded to rip into this poor guy about how he was abusing the U.S. and should be deported. If I took away a star for every time he used the N-word, the driver would be at like minus 20 stars. I don't understand how someone could be so ignorant. Story 49, only did 15 twice. First driver was high. Car smelled strongly of weed. He was texting constantly, missed a few exits and crossover at last second. Second one robbed me, literally drove to a convenience store in bad area of town at 4 a.m., told me to get him $100 out of ATM if I wanted him to take me home. Reported both to Uber. They gave me $20 toward the future fare in both cases and didn't say anything else or call. Story 50, older gentleman started talking about welfare queens and how they'll have kids with like 9 dads to get more welfare money. I told him my mom was on welfare when I was a kid. He just said that my mom was the exception and started going on and on again. Another one started making really rapey comments about a woman he had just dropped off. Another was texting and driving. Another was Facebooking and driving. Another one tried to get me into his MLM. I can go on and on. I don't do Uber anymore. I don't get nearly as many crazies on Lyft. Story 51. I was heading to the airport and grabbed an Uber 15-mile trip one way. When the driver arrived, he rolled down his window and asked where I was going, and I told him the airport. I was surprised he didn't know. He huffed and puffed and said he really didn't want to drive to the airport. Meanwhile, I have a flight to catch. I told him to cancel the trip. I don't want the charge for his BS, and he'll find another ride. I'm sure drivers are looking for any sort of pickup at 4:30 in the morning. The bars got out at 2 a.m., and most people aren't up yet to need rides around town. Not to mention the actual trip will be hella quick with no one on the road. After slowly moving his vehicle forward a couple times, as if to say he was going to cancel the ride, he agreed to go. I hopped in, and the entire way he kept talking about why he didn't want to go to the airport, how he wouldn't have a rider going back to town, he shouldn't have taken the ride, etc. I think I really set him off when I told him how much I was being charged by Uber versus how much he was making. The dude made 30 for literally 30 to 40 minutes worth of driving. I didn't give him 1 star because I don't believe in that unless something terrible happens, but I certainly didn't give him 5 stars. Story 52. It was a pickup at the airport. He didn't pull up to the curb. He just threw on his flashers and sat in the middle of 3 lanes. So I had a Frogger into traffic to get to his car. Didn't bother popping the trunk, even after seeing I had a suitcase. After I got in his car, throwing my bags in the back seat and buckling in, I noticed his windshield was smashed in. If I had noticed it earlier, I wouldn't have gotten in. His car was dirty and his driving was erratic. What pushed it over the edge is a pet peeve of mine. With Uber Lyft drivers, he used the Uber app for navigation rather than Waze or Gmaps. So we drove straight into a known construction zone, and we sat for 20 minutes instead of avoiding traffic. Story 53. He swiped my boyfriend's truck. When he dropped us off, I knew he was coming too close, and yep, scraped the side of him. I was so mad, but Uber paid out. I have 2 stories. One partial my fault, the other she. First, I had a little too much of close. I Uber home for a $5 trip and pass out. The driver takes 30 miles away, and when I wake up, I was pissed. My $5 trip was 60. I had to make a Twitter account to post the image to get a refund. Second, driver refused to take a tollway because she did that. I was 20 minutes late when I told her to stay on the tollway. She told me to shut up. She doesn't go to my job and tell me how to do my job. Story 54. After a big night out, my wallet had fallen out of my pocket in the Uber. Less than 3 hours later, he had used my debit card to pay his power bill and buy a few items at the gas station. Needless to say, 1-star rating was given and police contacted. Story 55. My Uber driver found out he only lived around the corner from my house, then asked if he could come in and hang with me and my friends. Immediate 1 star, and I have to walk past his house every day for work now. Story 56. Not me, but a friend. He had some film equipment in the back, like camera bag and tripod, and the Uber driver told him that he should have called an XL, which doesn't really make sense when you only have 3 bags. The driver then stops the ride close to the drop-off and says that my friend has to pay him $5 cash or he wouldn't drive on for making him open his trunk. Story 57. There were 3 of us. Dude pulls up in an old POS that smelled strongly of exhaust. We open the doors to get in, and his seat is all the way up to the steering wheel, so he's pressed up against it. The inside of the car was filthy and reeked of cigarettes. We're trying to get in when he starts driving off. We yell, he stops. We actually get in. He takes off at the speed of molasses, swerves all over the place. We all consider getting out, but decide to just go with it because we don't want to wait for another car and be late to our destination. Get on the highway, and his car won't go over 40 miles per hour. He flipped off everyone that passed him. 30-minute ride. Took 45 minutes, and he never said a word. It was so surreal.